Welcome to the weekly swing low. It's April 19th, 2025, and we still have our daily swing low in progress. That is a very good sign. We did not get our weekly swing, which is what we needed to see as our next step in forming a bottom, but the daily swing low is still intact. So let's jump into our tickers. We'll start with SPY. And I think the thing to keep in mind, the thing to think about is that a bottom is more of a process, right? So we first need a swing low on a lower time frame, then a daily, then a weekly, and then so on and so forth. So we talked about this last week, right? We had this green candle, this big weekly potential reversal. It was setting up, in the bullish case, it would have been a bullish outside, a compound bullish outside candle, right? So instead of this red candle, what we were expecting was something that looked more like this, right? So these two candles would be an outside candle of this. Well, I mean, really, this would do something like that, right? So like make a higher high above here. So, or really above here, right? We needed to make a higher high above there. We didn't get that. Instead, what we got was a red candle. But importantly, this is still just an inside candle. I mean, notice, I'll just draw the line so that it's like crystal clear. We're just inside the range of that weekly candle that's trying to form the bottom. That's a gigantic range. We'll look on the daily because that big low came on one day, obviously. And so we have to get out of this range for anything interesting to happen. The most important thing I would note here, though, is that this consolidation has been happening on the upper end of the range. Like we could have been consolidating down here, for example. Instead, we're consolidating up here. That's important. That's a signal. If this was a weekly cycle low, that would be one of the shortest weekly cycles we've ever had at 12 weeks, which, given how fast we declined, that would make sense. I talked about this last week. A really extreme move in price could mean that a cycle ends earlier than you would expect. I mean, look at this cycle at 16 weeks, also not a typical weekly cycle that you get. The other thing I would note is that going back to the weekly candle that formed the 2020 the bottom after the COVID crash. Look at this candle. Like we're going all the way back to 2020 here. So you had this big candle, which actually was a bullish outside candle. Like notice this candle, right? Like in real time, again, bottoms are a process, not like a snapshot, not a moment in time. But after this candle printed, you're like, oh, well, we have a bullish outside candle. That's important. We have a higher high. We didn't close above that higher high, so that was something that kind of give you some caution, some pause. And then what did we do the following week? We had a red candle. But what did that red candle do? It consolidated at the upper end of the range. Does that look familiar? Now, I'm not saying every bottom looks like this, but this is an important thing to kind of note. You don't always just get the rocket ship after. But other bottoms have been more decisive, if you will. Like look at this little wick. And then what did you do the next week? Nice higher high. And then the following week, another higher high. Some consolidation, probably washed some people out and then continued up. So this is another one where we just made higher highs. Not every bottom is going to look the same. And this one, the bottom came on a red candle and then we just went, whoop. Was this your bear market low? Yeah, that's right. That was your bear market low in 2023 where we just went, whoop. Or no, actually, that's not right. Excuse me. That was the first really big pullback we had after the bear market low from October 2022. That's right. So that's just important to note, like that structure. This absolutely could be a bottom, and one we need to prepare for that. If we look on the daily, just as we talked about how that weekly cycle would be a really short one at 12 weeks, this would be a super short daily cycle at 17 days if we did get our bottom on Friday, April 4th. I talked about how everything was just kind of consolidating inside a range. Well, this is a more actionable, important range. Look at this daily candle. I get rid of these other lines so it doesn't confuse you. But that's probably the most important range you need to know about. That big reversal we got on Wednesday after the tariff pause was announced, all of this has just been consolidation inside that range. I mean, look at that, right? All of this is just, and in fact, we're inside like a smaller range, like right there. The other thing I'll call out, and this is just super important, we talked about how, actually I had just erased this line, but I'll redraw it here because it's important. We talked about how one of the most important signals we had was this this line here, I'll get rid of all these other lines. Again, I don't want to confuse you. I want to make sure you can see this price action. This is the candle that marks the low, and this is the high of that candle. I'll zoom in so we're all very clear on what we're looking at. And so price needed to close above the high of this candle here to form a daily swing low. And so again, that high is $523.17. That's on SPY. There's an equivalent level on the other indices, QQQ, IWM, etc. Notice what price did, right? So we crossed above it, closed like appreciably above that level on that Wednesday when we got that reversal. But since then, price has just consolidated. But where has it consolidated? Above that level, right? So that 523, just call it 523 even. It's not a coincidence. Look what price did. Price washed. I'll just zoom in again, just so that we're crystal clear here. Price washed below it and then reversed violently. And then we made a little move up. And then what did price do? It just kind of like meandered down. And what did it? Look at this again. Another wick below and then a recovery. Didn't quite get there on Friday. All that to say, this level is telling you very clearly if price breaks down below it, so let's say a close below 523, that is your first warning sign. This whole range, we're going to probably have price discovery within it, but think of 523 as an important pivot, a midpoint almost. And so as long as price remains above that level, again, that's the level that marks the swing low. That is bullish. That is just consolidation, which could lead to this next leg higher. And the other thing I would call out is we still have this unfilled gap, right? So price had this gap situation here, right? So we gapped down from this candle to this candle. So price still needs to fill that. You could absolutely see a world where we fill that and then come back and still play within this range. It doesn't mean once we fill this gap that we're up and away, but that's another just level to pay attention to above. So that 523 level is absolutely critical. But to the upside, what you want to see on Monday is price trade above the high from Friday. So that would be, in this case, the high from Friday for SPY is 531. Call it 531 even. And again, that 523 level, watch for false breakdowns below it. Just because price goes below it doesn't mean we're gonna melt down. It could actually be a setup for a slingshot in the other direction. The other thing to keep in mind is that the weekly swing, we still need to close above 548.62 to have a weekly swing. That's what you really want to see to say, okay, that was probably our low, and we're probably going back to test all-time highs. Or make some kind of lower high, still would mean there's some upside to come. Other thing to note is this monthly candle. Look at the look of this monthly candle, this wick. It wicked below here. Again, these are all really bullish signals. And note that the month would go green once price closes above or goes above 557. So that's important to note. So that's SPY. Let's look at the other indices. It's all the same story, just different price levels. So QQQ, it's consolidating. That swing low level for QQQ on the daily is 443, call it. The weekly swing, we need to close above 467. And so to be clear, that 443 level, that's the level price needs to stay above, right? Like same kind of picture as SPY. This gigantic candle is forming a range, but you really want to pay attention to this little range, this level here. Again, same price is doing the same thing for the Qs. This is not a coincidence, folks. In the case of the Qs, to be important to note, we actually already filled the gap, right? Like, so this giant candle from Wednesday, it went up and filled the gap, whereas SPY hasn't. So that's important to note. And if we look at for QQQ, the monthly candle goes green once we get above, 467. And if we look at the ratio of QQQ to SPY, we're actually starting to break down. So it formed a swing high back on Tuesday. Well, we actually confirmed the swing high on Wednesday with a little gap down. So that means SPY is starting to outperform QQQ. Not always the most bullish sign. What about the Dow? So DIA, what's the level on that guy? So for the Dow, price has to stay above above 392 to maintain that daily swing low. But we have to close above 407 for a weekly swing, and the monthly goes green above 418. And the Dow to SPY ratio it just went green on Friday, so it looks like it's trying to bounce. What about IWM? So IWM was actually green on Friday, which is not the same as the other indices. And notice the shape of the IWM weekly candle. Nice little lower wick here, so much more bullish setup. So for IWM, it's got to close above 192 for the weekly swing, and we've got to stay. So actually, we still haven't actually formed the daily swing on IWM. So it's got to close above 190.25 for that to happen, and the monthly goes green above 198. These are all levels to keep in mind if we do continue to see a rally here. Like those are levels where you might see resistance, some potential profit taking, that sort of thing. And we're noticing a bounce here for the ratio of IWM to SPY. So we have a daily swing that's about a few days old. So we're now on day 3 of a new daily cycle for the ratio of IWM to SPY, which is to say IWM just started to outperform SPY. A green weekly candle trying to set up a weekly swing low. And this is at like an all-time low at this point. Is that right? Yeah. Wow. We are at all-time lows. So if anything, that is fuel for a pretty big upside move for IWM, which is pretty positive for the market as a whole. IWM doesn't tend to rally as strongly. Let's look at IWM versus QQQ really, really quick. So as you would expect, that's also on day 3 as well. That is also at all-time lows. So definitely set up for a nice bounce, even if it's short-lived. Let's move on to semis. So SMH, I've been talking about this for a while. SMH actually topped out back in July. And so it's a really good candidate for a long-term cycle low. And it also tells you SMH might print a long-term, like the fact that SMH prints a very noticeable long-term cycle low is very bullish for the broader market because it means SMH has been declining since July 2024. Whereas the market actually only just topped out, like a few months ago. So maybe SMH is having a longer decline and the market is having a shorter decline, but they're both going to bounce at the same time. Which is to say, if SMH is coming out of a month of a long-term cycle low, that means the rest of the market should also get dragged up with it. So the monthly candle goes green above 235 for SMH. And for SMH, that daily swing low is maintained above 194.83. So we're actually below that right now. So we've got to get back above that to get for this to be back to bullish action. I talked about how the other indices were consolidating at the upper end of the range. This is definitely closer to the lower end, right? Like you kind of call this the middle. So that's not super bullish. And like really, really short term, Friday was an inside candle. It was actually an inside day. So so Friday we traded inside the range from Thursday. That's a high at 196.77. Excuse me, 196.76, and a low at 188.53. So those are your near-term price levels for SMH. Let's move on to Dixie. So Dixie has fallen below 100. We were thinking that would happen, right? So this pivot here has been broken. We've closed below it on a weekly, but we're also on week 30, so it's really late, right? And so I'm surprised that we're not getting more of a bounce, to be quite honest. On the daily, we're on day 28. So again, getting late in that week daily cycle. First step on Monday would be a close above 99.48. That would set up a potential daily swing low, and potential daily cycle low and maybe a weekly cycle low. But if we look at the 10-year Treasury, that was moving in lockstep with the Dixie, and now the two seem to be decoupling. So on the weekly chart, We actually have a nice little swing low for the US 10-year Treasury yield by closing above 4.26. And then this last week, so that was actually the week of April 7th. And then last week, we just consolidated at the upper end of the range, basically exactly like basically exactly like the broader markets, except the broader markets don't have a swing low in place on the weekly level, whereas the US 10-year Treasury yield does. Said a different way, it looks a lot like we have a weekly cycle low for for the 10-year Treasury yield at week 28 with this bounce here. That said, your first warning sign would be a close below 4.26, which is what marks that swing low. And we're not far from there, so you want to watch out for that. And on the daily chart, we are on, I think this is day 9 of a daily cycle. I mean, you can see really very near term, this is a low of 426. So again, you really want to see price stay above here, right? Like we got this little bounce on Friday, and actually Friday is an inside day. So similar to what Dixie did actually, I guess. Well, no, excuse me. Was that Dixie that had an inside day on Friday? No, it was actually IWM, right? Is that right? Or was it the Dow? Okay, well I'm forgetting, but actually, yeah, it was SMH. So kind of similar to the SMH structure, actually. So that's the 10-year Treasury yield. Let's move on to TLT. Well, actually, oil. So oil is bouncing. We kind of expected this, given this has been a range for a long time. We got a breakdown below it, and then this little reversal type candle with a lower wick. But we didn't get the weekly swing that we needed. So we needed to close above $63.87. We can still do that next week, right? So imagine a candle that does something like this next week. That would leave behind a weekly swing and potential weekly cycle low to coincide with a potential weekly cycle low for the market. What about TLT? So that's correlated with US 10-year Treasury yield inversely. So this is going to go down as that goes up. And you can see, we talked about this last week. This looks like a swing high on week 11. We had this big down week, the week before last. And then this is just consolidation. Look, and again, that same kind of concept. This is consolidation at the lower end of the range in this case. And if we look at the daily chart, we may have a daily cycle low in place, right? This is actually looking like it's day 4. The catch is this could just end up being a daily cycle that's very left translated, tops out very early. So not necessarily something to get excited. It's a little too early to get excited. The level that you want to watch is for a close below $87.23. That's the low from Friday. That would tell you that this is probably topped out, and that turns this into a swing high. That's TLT, and TBT is doing the opposite. As you can imagine, that's kind of how they work, right? So for TBT, a break above 36.60 tells you we're probably resuming this uptrend. And this thing, you want it to stay above, what is that? Call it 35.19. So that's TBT, which is the inverse of TLT. Let's move on to crypto, and then we'll look at precious metals, and we'll close this thing out. So for Bitcoin, let's look at Bitcoin first. We've had this pretty, at first it was a nice little orderly bull flag, sideways flagging, and then we started this downdraft. Now we have the potential for this to be a weekly low. We've got to close above $86,000 and 86,000, call it, right? Just above there. So you need to see something like that, right? And we are close to that. We're kind of set. We're very close to that. This weekly candle closes in 1 day. So we'll see how this thing closes tomorrow. That's Bitcoin. What about ETH? Similar levels for ETH. So ETH, or similar structure, different levels. So ETH has to close above 1688, 1689, call it. That will give you a weekly swing, a very much needed one. And let's close out with precious metals. So gold has been on a tear. We just closed out week 15. This is like this is just so vertical though that we clearly are going to need a pullback soon, just to even keep the uptrend healthy. On a daily level, right? Like we're still actually pretty early in what's probably a new daily cycle. So that's probably day 8. Short term, you want to watch for a close below 32.84. That would turn this into a daily swing high. So that's your bearish scenario. just big picture, keep in mind, what month are we in right now? This is month 31 of the 8 year cycle. So we're getting definitely, the shortest 8 year cycle rally was 34 months, excuse me. So we're definitely getting close to that, no doubt. And we're on week 15, so it's not early in the weekly cycle. So we shouldn't expect like another 10 more weeks of rally, maybe another 3-4 weeks if it's super bullish. And for silver, this is the trouble for silver. We actually broke below the previous weekly cycle low, right? We're now on week, what is this? Probably week 13. So I don't love that, to be honest. 12, 15. So we have a swing high on week 12 and we're now on week 15. So this thing is totally set up to, make another break back above this high. But again, the fact that we broke below this is a little, I don't know. It warrants a little caution is warranted. But if you look at GDX and silver have been moving very closely together. But notice GDX did nothing of the sort, right? This is your last weekly swing for GDX, and look where it is. The last low that it put in, way above that. So that's really auspicious. But again, week 15 for GDX, kind of similar to gold in that we're not early in the weekly cycle. And for GDX, importantly, we do have a swing high on the daily, right? So this candle here from Wednesday, the low for this candle is 51.29. We closed below that, 51.29, just a few cents below it, really. So you want to watch that as your bull bear line, 51.29. If price could cross back above it, boom, you have a little false breakdown and potential fuel for more of an upside move. So that's your actionable level for the miners. And then we'll just close out with natural gas. So natural gas is in weekly cycle decline, right? This is the 5th week. What is that? Yeah, we just finished the 5th week of the decline. You can see this is your swing high, very clear. We marked that a few weeks back. Swing high is active below 4.01. And what does the daily on this thing look like? Ugh, yikes. Let's just clean this chart up. So the daily, yikes. So where are we at in terms of cycles, right? So like this is probably day 15 of this daily cycle. And in terms of the weekly, right, like assuming this was a weekly cycle low, it looks like we're in the middle of a left translated weekly cycle for natural gas. Not great. So it's week 11 and we topped out on week 5. That's the bearish scenario. It is also possible that this whole thing is a weekly cycle and we're actually on week 23. It's not important to kind of guess these things. It's more to have an expectation in mind and then watch the price action in real time. So for natural gas, it needs to close back above 3.60 for a weekly swing. So again, you'd be looking for something like this. And that's your weekly. On the daily, at this point, given where we are, needs to close back above 3.34. So, something like that, right? I mean, it would be nice if it was a huge candle like this, but something like that, right? Like that would mark your daily swing and tell you, okay, maybe we're resuming back up, right? Maybe we're getting a daily cycle low here. Maybe the weekly cycle is over. So that's your update. Again, daily cycle low is a daily swing low is in place. We are literally consolidating right above it. That is actually pretty bullish and very actionable because once you see price break down below that, it tells you what price wants to do. So that's our update for today. Thanks for watching.